You've heard the news, haven't you? You've seen the headlines scrolling at the bottom of the screen. They say it's just a seasonal spike. They tell you to get plenty of rest, drink fluids, stay home. They call it strain H3N2. But the old doctors, the ones who were practicing medicine 50 years ago, they call it something else. They whisper it. They call it the Hong Kong killer. In 1968, it came out of the east and swept across the world like a forest fire. 1 million dead. People were burning up in 3 days. Morgues were overflowing. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. It went into hiding. And now, half a century later, they say it has returned. I thought it was nonsense. Just another internet scare tactic to sell masks and vitamins. My name is Andrew. I'm 32 years old. I go to the gym 3 times a week. I hadn't been sick in 5 years. I have a strong immune system. Or so I thought, until last Tuesday. It started on the subway, just a regular evening rush hour, packed shoulder to shoulder. The air was thick with the smell of wet coats and city grime. There was a man standing right next to me. He looked wrong. His skin was pale, like old paper, but his forehead was glistening with a slick layer of sweat. Even though the train car was freezing, he was breathing heavily, a wet, rattling sound deep in his chest. I tried to subtly shift away, but there was nowhere to go. Suddenly, he turned his head and coughed right in my direction. I tried to turn away, but he felt Italiano, tiny, warm droplets hitting my cheek. I flinched in disgust. When I got home, I scrubbed my face with soap until it hurt. I took some vitamin C. I told myself I was fine, but that night, I woke up with a sensation I had never felt before. It wasn't a sore throat. It wasn't a runny nose. It was something else. I felt like something was being born inside me. It felt like a tiny, hot coal had been swallowed and was now smoldering in the center of my chest. A heat that was slowly, but inevitably, crawling through my veins. I took my temperature, 99 degrees. Nothing serious. I took some Tylenol and went back to bed. Sure, I'd sleep it off. I have never been so wrong. The next morning, I didn't wake up. I surfaced from a nightmare into a reality that was far worse. My body no longer belonged to me. The tiny coal inside had turned into a blast furnace. I could feel hot blood pounding against my temples, as if my brain was trying to break out of my skull. I reached for the thermometer. The numbers danced before my eyes. 103.6. I tried to stand up to get water, and the world tilted. My legs were jelly. My joints felt like they were being twisted on a rack. I collapsed onto the hallway floor. The linoleum felt freezing against my skin, but it was the only relief I had. I lay there, cheek pressed to the floor, and I could literally feel the steam rising off my body. This wasn't the flu. The flu is when you lie under a blanket and watch TV. This was violence. The virus wasn't just multiplying inside me, it was eating me. By the evening of the second day, my fever broke 104. The medicine didn't work. It was like throwing a cup of water into a volcano. Then came the delirium. I lay on my bed, soaked in sweat so deep I could have wrung out the mattress. The walls of my room began to dissolve. I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was in a crowded, suffocating hospital ward from 1968. I could hear the groans of dying people around me. I could smell bleach and rotting flesh. I saw shadows in the corners of the room. They weren't hallucinations. They were real. Tall, dark figures standing there, waiting for me to burn out. They whispered in a language I didn't understand, but I knew what it was. It was the language of death. I tried to call for help. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers feeling like fat, useless sausages. I managed to dial 911. The voice on the other end was weary, exhausted. I could barely form words, just gasping sounds about fever and burning. They told me to hold on. The paramedics who arrived much later that day were ghosts themselves, their faces pale and drawn behind their masks. They gave me an injection, shook their heads, and left. "Everyone is sick," one of them said, his voice flat. "No beds in the hospitals, just ride it out. They didn't know that you don't ride this out. You survive it, or you don't. The third night was the worst. I lay there feeling my internal organs beginning to boil in their own fluids. I stopped understanding the difference between sleep and wakefulness. Time melted. I felt my skin cracking like dry earth in a desert, and through the cracks, that internal fire was leaking out. I remembered reading about the Hong Kong flu. It had a cruel twist. It targeted the young and the strong. It turned your own immune system against you. The harder you fought, the faster you burned. My own strength, the very thing I was proud of, was now the fuel for my own destruction. My fit body was a bonfire. At some point I realized I was dying. It wasn't scary. It was peaceful. The heat reached such a peak that the pain vanished. There was only a blinding white light. I saw the man from the subway again. He was standing at the foot of my bed. Now, I could see his face clearly. It wasn't a face from our time. His clothes, his haircut, they were old. He looked at me with his pale, boiled eyes and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile of recognition, of welcome. "Welcome to 68, son," he whispered, his voice a dry rustle. I closed my eyes and prepared for that breath to be my last. I woke up 24 hours later. The silence in the room was absolute. The fever had dropped as sharply as it had risen, 98.6. I was alive. The room was a disaster zone. Sheets were twisted and soaked. The floor was littered with empty water bottles and pill packets. But I was alive. The doctors, when I finally spoke to one on a telehealth call, said I was lucky, that my body fought it off. They used words like cytokine storm and robust immune response. But when I look in the mirror now, I see a stranger. My eyes are sunken. My skin has taken on a strange, grayish tint that hasn't gone away in a week. I survived, yes, but something inside me burned away forever in that furnace. I feel a void inside, and the cold. I am constantly cold now, even under 3 blankets, a deep, bone-chilling cold that no heat can touch. And there is one more thing. I see them now. I see them on the subway, in the grocery store. People who are just a little too pale, people with a wet sheen on their foreheads, even in the cold. Those who are carrying that ember inside them. I see the flicker in their eyes, the same one I saw in the man on the train. I watch as the Hong Kong killer chooses its new victims. It didn't leave in 1969. It just waited for us to forget. Listen to me. If you feel a strange warmth in your chest tonight, if you think it's just a cold, run. Lock your door. Pray. Because when this fire starts, nothing can put it out. Wait. You look a little flushed. Are you feeling okay, Jewer forehead? It looks very hot.